Will Johnston from LMU may have gotten the headlines, but it was Gonzaga's backcourt duo of Nolan Hickman and Ryan Nembhard that took care of business in Gonzaga's win on Thursday evening.
You are Locked On Zags, your daily podcast on the Gonzaga Bulldogs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What is going on, y'all? Happy Friday and welcome into the Locked On Zags podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host and longtime Gonzaga podcaster, Andy Patton, here to bring you news and updates on all things Zag athletics. Today's episode of Locked On Zags is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more, folks. New customers who join right now, you'll get $200 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. So visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn today to get started. Well, we got some discussion about Lisa Fortier's program and their big win over St. Mary's and the disrespect that continues for this team with the top 16 bracket reveal. We'll get to that. We're also going to talk a little Zag baseball at the end of the show. Their first game is Friday evening at UCLA. We're going to talk a little bit about that, what this team looks like for this year. Also, of course, going to preview Gonzaga's Saturday tilt against the Tigers of Pacific. Jam-packed show, but of course, we got a lead with Gonzaga's 17-point victory over the Lions of LMU on Thursday evening. If you watched this game, you know that it did not feel like a 17-point victory. It was tense in the first half, a lot of struggles, a lot of heroics from Will Johnston from LSU. If you did not watch this game, you probably saw a 17-point win and thought, oh, okay, that's about what we would have expected. Maybe not quite as good as we were hoping, considering how they did against them earlier in the season, especially when they were at more full strength for LMU. But this is kind of just one of those things. And I think it goes back to the conversation we've had a handful of times on this show about the last couple of years, last year not as much, but the years prior to that, where Gonzaga was just obliterating everybody in the WCC. There was never any mystery. There was never any close halves or anything like that. That was the anomaly. Gonzaga has historically dominated the WCC for 20 years. We know that, but it wasn't like it was always, they're up 16-2 in the first 5 minutes of the game and then the other team never gets within 10. That has happened a lot in the last couple of years, but it wasn't always the case. This kind of game is pretty typical. And I know it feels like a step down because this team peaked in 2021 and it has not been as good since then. And I understand that is challenging, but they still won by 15 plus points in this game. It was just a little ugly, particularly in the first half. They were only up 1 point at halftime. Will Johnston went nuclear. This is a kid who had a bad game against Gonzaga the first time out, took some ugly shots in that game, and frankly took some ugly shots in this game. He just knocked him down. Shout out to him. Really, really good first half in particular. He had 22 in the first half, finished with 33 points. I didn't score in the final 7 minutes of this game, though, and that was the story. The second half, Gonzaga outscored LMU 44-28. 47 in the first half, 44 in the second half. So the offense didn't change all that much. The defense, in a major way, clamped down. They made adjustments. They figured out how to slow Will Johnston down in a big way. And it was just a much calmer, much better, much more perfectly, strongly executed second half from the Zags. They also shot 10 of 20 from three. I saw a tweet from Stephen Carr, S-Cargo on Twitter, the first host of the Locked On Zags podcast, who said that I think they had 1.49 points per possession. It was one of their highest points per possession that they've had in a really long time. This didn't feel like a dominant offensive performance. There was turnover issues in the first half. Graham Ike didn't quite have – he still finished with 23 points, but he was 11 of 19, missed more shots than he typically does. Anton Watson was good in this game, especially defensively, but didn't dominate offensively. But 10 of 20 from three. That three-point shot is back for Gonzaga. It has been back in the last couple of games. That has been a huge monster development for the Zags. They're probably not going to shoot 50% every single game. They're not going to be getting tacos even on the road every single game like they did in this one. But the three-point shooting being much more consistent lately has been is almost in – I can't even describe exactly how important it is for Gonzaga. It's monumental if they're able to do this. Ben Gregg hit a couple threes in the first half. I think he had three. Really nice to see him do that. But Gonzaga struggled with the zone, and there were some issues that they had in the first half. They cleaned them up in the second half. I mentioned the guards. Nembhard had 16 points and 11 assists. He shot 7 of 11 from the field. Masterful game from Ryan Nembhard. 11 assists. I believe he has 26 assists in the team's last 3 games. He is a gifted passer. And those early season struggles from him are long in the rearview mirror. He's still not a knockdown elite 3-point shooter by any stretch, but his ability to assess the defense, get guards on his hip, attack via the pick and roll, find open players, throw that lob over the top has been absolutely incredible. I want to quickly go through the 5 keys that we laid out before this game and how they kind of impacted the performance by the Zags on Thursday evening. Key number 1 was to keep up the momentum. Didn't really happen. There was concern going into a game where you have a long gap. You just won a big emotional road game against a blue blood program in Kentucky. Now you're going back on the road. You're playing a team that you beat by 40-something points last time. They're missing their best player in Dominic Harris, the guy that you have like this kind of emotional connection to. They're missing Kelly Leopepe, who did not play in this one. They only have 6 scholarship players. It's kind of hard to get up for that kind of game. We're talking about college kids. We're talking about teenagers, 20-year-olds. It's hard to kind of bring that energy, bring that fire every single game. That's not an excuse. It's just difficult to do. And in this game, they didn't do it. We knew LMU was going to throw different looks. I still believe Stan Johnson's a pretty good coach. He's been dealt a bit of a raw hand this year. He has also, it's not like it's entirely absent of his fault or this team is struggling, but we knew he was going to make adjustments and figure out ways to attack Gonzaga differently because what they did the first time did not work. They tried the zone defense. They tried other things. They did a lot of isolation work with Will Johnston, and it worked. And Gonzaga had to kind of got punched in the mouth, and they had to adjust. And earlier in the year, those adjustments weren't happening. They might scrape through a game like this and still win. It's kind of what we saw against Pacific last time out. They never really recovered. They just kind of fought back and won. But this Gonzaga team did. So the slow start was a problem. We don't love seeing that. And the momentum kind of got stalled a little bit, but they still got back up and won this game by a good margin. Key number 2, we wanted to see them force those turnovers. This was a big thing that they were able to do successfully the first time around. Not as much of a thing in this game. LMU tightened it up a little bit. 12 turnovers for LMU. Still not great, but obviously much. I think they had 20 last time they played. Gonzaga only had 7 turnovers in this game, though. And Gonzaga also had 7 steals. So 7 of the 12 turnovers for LMU were steals by Gonzaga. 3 of them coming from Anton Watson, 3 of them coming from Ryan Nembhard again. Not only has he improved offensively as a passer and his 3-point shooting has improved, but defensively he's making more of an impact as well. Key number 3 was a big game from Nolan Hickman. I didn't mention Nolan Hickman earlier because I wanted to talk about him here. Hickman obviously had a career high night against LMU last time these two teams played. There was definitely some juice in that game because he was facing off against Dominic Harris. This game, no Dom, but obviously didn't impact Nolan's performance much. He said finished with 22 points. He had 3 assists in this one. A lot of his points came in the second half. He was good in the first half, hit some key shots, but really kind of helped put this game away for Gonzaga with some strong shooting in the second half. He finished 7 of 12 from the field and 4 of 6 from 3. He has been a really, really good 3-point shooter the last couple, really since the WCC season started. He has been lights out from distance. He was also a good 4 of 4 from the free throw line in this one. Key number 4 was we wanted to see continued growth and confidence from the freshmen Braden Huff and Dusty Stromer. We didn't get that. We kind of hoped that Braden would build off of that really excellent performance that he had against Kentucky and have another strong game. He played well against Portland before that. Was not the case at all. Huff finished with just 2 points and 1 rebound in this game. He was 1 of 3 from the field, only 1 2-point field goal attempt. His other 2 shots were 3-pointers. He missed both of them. And the LMU bigs just went right at him. This is where my continued criticism of Coach John Calipari. All they needed to do when Braden Huff was in the game and was killing them in that second half, give the ball to one of their bigs, Aaron Bradshaw, Adu Thiero, Zvonimir Visic, whomever, and just have them go to work on Braden Huff. And they didn't do that. LMU did. Lars Thiemann scored on Braden Huff a couple of times. Huff picked up 2 quick fouls. He only played 8 minutes. In this game. He still has significant work to do defensively. And he didn't provide much offensively. I'm not overly worried about Braden Huff. He's going to be fine, but the consistency from him is just not there. You don't know what version of Braden Huff you're going to get night in and night out. I'm sure that's frustrating for Mark Few. I'm sure that's very frustrating for Braden Huff. But right now, the difference between him being a huge impact player for this team and being who he is right now is that consistency. He's capable of doing it. He's just not capable of doing it every single night. Meanwhile, Dusty Stromer struggled as well. He had 3 fouls in 15 minutes. He had a pair of blocks, which was nice, but he was 0 of 1 from the field. No other stats, just the 2 blocks, the missed shot, 3 fouls. Still needs some consistency from him, and he's struggled on the road in a lot of games for Gonzaga this year, so certainly want to see him be able to step up there. Last thing in this game was hoping to see the Zags empty the bench, maybe see some of Yo, see some more of Krajinovic, Pavle Stosic. Didn't get any of that. We did get Krajinovic. The Zags played 8 in this game. Huff, Stromer, the starters, and then Luka Krajinovic. He played 5 minutes. He picked up a foul. That's it. In fact, the bench for Gonzaga in this game, 3 players played. The bench combined to have 2 points and 1 rebound, which all came from Braden Huff, 2 blocks, which both came from Dusty Stromer, and 6 fouls. That's what the bench brought for Gonzaga in this game. That's going to be a problem. LMU had 6 scholarship players, and their bench scored 13 points. Gonzaga scored 2. That is an area of, it's not that it has been bad throughout the year, it's just incredibly inconsistent. And we'll need to see growth in that area for this team to make an impact in March Madness. Before we get to that, though, the Zags got to turn their attention to Pacific, who they play on Saturday at the McCarthy Athletic Center. We're going to talk about that game and whether a win could put them back into the AP Top 25. It sounds crazy, but it is not that crazy. More on that after a word from today's sponsor, FanDuel. Get buckets with your first bet on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your bet wins. So bet on all your favorite NBA players and teams with quick bets, live same-game parlays, exclusive props, and more. And look, I'm going to continue to say it. We're going to talk about it more later in the show. The women's team, 240-1 is the bet for them right now. A $5 bet. This is to win the national championship, I should say. $5 bet, $1,200. We're going to talk about how disrespected they were by the top 16 committee. But if you want to throw a little bit of money down and gamble on that, I am all in on that. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to shoot your shot. FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NBA. All right, segment 2, still Andy Patton, still Locked On Zags, coming at you on this Friday afternoon, morning, evening, Saturday, whenever you're listening to this show. We're going to get you a preview now of Gonzaga's Saturday evening tilt against the Tigers of Pacific, February 17th, 6 p.m. at the McCarthy Athletic Center. The game will be on KHQ in the Spokane market. It'll be on Root Sports in the Seattle, Portland, Pacific Northwest market that's not Spokane, and then it'll be on ESPN Plus for those of you all the way out of market. Again, if you want to join our Discord channel, it is free to join. There's over 300 Zags talking all the time, and we are also helping people find ways to watch these games, especially when they're not nationally televised games, so definitely come join us there. The Zags won this game last time when they played at Pacific. It was not a particularly fun game. In fact, I'd argue it was one of the least fun games that Gonzaga has played all season long. 82-73 was the final score in that one. It was a grind. The Zags were down by 1 at half. Pacific is terrible. I mean, folks, this team is very, very bad. Gonzaga has struggled at Pacific in the past, so it wasn't a huge shock that they kind of didn't play their best, but this was coming off of that game against San Francisco when they won, but they really struggled in the end of the game. Their late game execution was terrible. The free throw shooting was horrendous. So that week was one of the worst for Gonzaga. They have really turned it around since then. Every game they've played since then has been a very good game, with the exception of the St. Mary's game, which wasn't even really a bad game. They just lost. And the first half against LMU was not great, but much better than they've played since that Pacific game. Meanwhile, Pacific, well, they haven't won. They haven't won since then. They didn't really win much before then. Pacific, they have lost 5 in a row since the Gonzaga game. They have lost 12 in a row overall. Folks, their last win for Leonard Perry's team was against a non-Division I opponent called Cal Maritime. Their last Division I win this season was against Mississippi Valley State on November 26th. They have not won a game since right after Thanksgiving. Mississippi Valley State, by the way, the only winless team in college basketball. That's it. They're the only team at the Division I level that has not won a single game this year. Pacific's only other Division I wins this year outside of Mississippi Valley State is Lemoyne, who is in their first year as a Division I basketball team. They beat Lamar, and interestingly, and I think their third game of the year, they went on the road against Cal and took them down. Now, Cal, not a particularly good Pac-12 team, but they were a brand new team, tons of new players, new coach in Mark Madsen. I'm not surprised Cal didn't have their stuff figured out at the start of the season. Still, shout out to Pacific for getting that win, but This is a very bad team. 6-21 on the year. They're 0-12 in the WCC. KenPom has them 348th. Adjusted offensive efficiency, 355th. Adjusted defensive efficiency, 348th. There are 361 Division I teams. They are a bottom 15 offense, bottom 15 overall team, bottom 15 defense, bottom 15 overall team, bottom 6 offense in the country. The Zags should not struggle in this game. They did last time, still won. Now they're at home. No real reason for a struggle. We're not going to go through a bunch of keys to victory in this game because we don't really need to. But what I want to talk about, I hope we don't need to, knock on wood for that. What I want to talk about is Gonzaga's potential ability to move into the top 25, back into the top 25 with a win here. And I know it seems weird to think about Gonzaga getting that kind of bump when they beat LMU, who they'd already beat by 40-something points, and Pacific, who, as we just established, is one of the 15 worst teams in all of college basketball. But it could happen. For one, St. Mary's had been 18-6. They won a couple games against, I think, Portland and Pepperdine, maybe Portland and somebody else. This is last week, and moved up to 20-6 and jumped all the way up to 18th in the AP poll. Gonzaga could do something very similar. And it's less about Gonzaga getting these wins. They need to probably blow out Pacific. You beat Pacific by 8 or 9 points, you probably don't get in the top 25. A lot of AP voters aren't necessarily looking at margin of victory. They're certainly not diving a whole lot deeper into that. They're looking at records. They're saying, okay, Gonzaga went 2-0. They now have this record. They're now here in KenPom. They're now here in the net. Should we rank them? That's how I don't know. I'm not, interviewing every AP voter to figure out how they're making their decisions. And certainly they're all doing it a little bit differently. But I don't think a lot of people are digging too much into margin of victory. But if Gonzaga beats Pacific by 6, or if Gonzaga beats Pacific by 53, that's going to change their net ranking. It's going to change their KenPom ranking. And I do think that is areas where a lot, at least of the AP voters, are considering when taking a look at who they want to put back in their top 25. And part of the reason that we expect Gonzaga could make this jump is because the teams at the bottom half of the top 25, and even the teams who are in the receiving votes category, they keep losing. They keep losing. Already this week, we haven't even gotten to Saturday when most of the teams in all of college basketball are going to be in action. Virginia, the 21st ranked team in the country, they lost to Pitt. Indiana State, who'd finally climbed into the top 25, having a masterful season in the Missouri Valley Conference, they get into the top 25, they lose to Illinois State. Illinois State is not good. That is a big loss for Indiana State. It's going to kick them back out of the top 25. Virginia probably going to get kicked out of the top 25 for losing to Pitt, who's not very good. Oklahoma snuck back into the top 25. They lost. I think they're playing Kansas on Saturday, so they're probably going to lose again. Maybe not. Kansas has been very susceptible. If Oklahoma, who's at home, beats Kansas, even after losing earlier in the week, they lost to Baylor, who's a very good team. Oklahoma might stick in the top 25. They might deserve to stick in the top 25. Losing to Baylor and beating Kansas is not exactly a bad week. However, if they also lose to Kansas, even though losses to Baylor and Kansas is by no stretch, damning for them, it's still probably not going to keep them in the top 25, especially since they're only barely holding on to a spot. So all three of those teams could be out. Florida Atlantic, who's number 24, they are taking on South Florida on Sunday. South Florida is 11-1 in the American Athletic Conference. FAU could very, very much lose that game. Very possible. I project that they will, personally. We'll see if I'm right about that. If FAU loses to South Florida, that means that 23, 24, and 25 will all have taken at least one loss this weekend. 21, Virginia will have taken at least one loss this weekend. That means there's going to be a lot of new teams in the bottom half of the top 25. Now, the Zags weren't 26th in the AP poll. They were 33rd last week. There are quite a few teams that received more votes than them in the AP top 25. Now, Colorado State and Nevada were two of those teams. They both lost. Now, Colorado State lost to San Diego State, who was also one of those teams, so that kind of cancels it out. Likely San Diego State, presuming they don't lose again this weekend. I'm not sure who they play on Saturday, but I think they actually play Friday. I think they play tonight. I think they play on Friday. I think they play in New Mexico, I think. Either way, San Diego State wins that game. They're probably going to be a more likely candidate to move into the top 25 than Gonzaga. They would have two big wins over better teams. They've obviously beat Gonzaga head-to-head. So that's likely one of the teams that would jump in. I had San Diego State ranked in my top 25 at Locked On College Basketball last week. I think they probably still deserve to be in the top 25. So they'll probably climb in. Clemson's, if they continue to win, they might climb in as well. But there's a real possibility for Gonzaga here. They'd be 20-6. if they pick up this victory over Pacific, which we're not super concerned that they're like not going to win that game. If they win that game against Pacific, 20-6, almost certainly still a top 20 team at Ken Pom. I think they're 19th right now as we're recording this. They're 23rd in the net. Again, probably not going to drop more than 2 spots with a win over Pacific unless it's a really close win. For the record, UCLA won on Thursday evening. They are now, I think, 104th, 105th in the net ranking. USC is like 103rd. Both those teams are really close to being in the top 100. That would make those 2 victories for Gonzaga that are currently quad 3 victories. They would move to quad 2 victories. So Gonzaga's resume is starting to look a little bit nicer, in part because of UCLA's big winning streak. That's a big help for them right now. Could be an even bigger boost if they move to that quad 2 level. So all that to say, the thought that Gonzaga wouldn't be able to get back in the top 25 until the week they play San Francisco, until the week they play St. Mary's, which is the same week. Maybe it might take that long, but I think there's a real chance they're in as soon as next Monday. And then that week, they only have 1 game, and it's against Santa Clara. Santa Clara right now just outside the top 100 in the net. Not great, but not terrible. If Gonzaga wins that game, beats Santa Clara at home, by that week, there's a really good chance that they're in the top 25. If they're in the top 25 heading into that matchup against St. Mary's, first of all, it's a top 25 on top 25, which is always good. Good exposure for the WCC, good exposure for both programs. It makes that San Francisco game feel a little bit juicier. I think there's a very good chance Gonzaga is a top 25 team as soon as Monday. And I feel very confident, provided they win, they need to take care of business, not only against Pacific, but against Santa Clara. If they do that, I think we're definitely talking about a top 25 team before they take on San Francisco at the Chase Center and before they play St. Mary's in that really big one in early March. Well, the Zag women, they won in a blowout again, and they're still getting disrespected. It's like we keep having the same dang conversations about Lisa 48 squad. We're also going to get you an update on Gonzaga baseball. They're getting their season underway tonight. More on all of that after a word from today's sponsor, Game Time. Folks, sometimes family events, they're best when they're planned at the spur of the moment. And for that, you need Game Time, because Game Time is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all of the sports and music and comedy and theater events near you. And with killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their best price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. We're a little under a month away from conference tournaments, and Game Time is a great place to go buy those tickets for the WCC tournament in Las Vegas. Even if you just wanted to go for a day or two, you're still waiting to see whether Gonzaga is going to get that second double bye. Game Time is the perfect place for that type of event. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Right now, new Game Time users who use code LOCKEDON will get $20 off your first purchase. Again, terms do apply. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices, guaranteed. All right, folks, closing out the show today, talking about the Gonzaga baseball program as well as the women's basketball team. We'll start with baseball. Friday is the opening day across college baseball. And Gonzaga opens the season on the road in Los Angeles, taking on the Bruins of UCLA. First pitch is 5 p.m. on Friday. It's a 3-game series going on down there in L.A. And Gonzaga is not projected to do as well as they have the last couple of years. There's been a ton of talent out the program, many of them getting drafted. The pitching development under Coach Brandon Harmon has been extraordinary, but it has been difficult to replenish the amount of talent that has left the program. 2 years ago, you had Gabriel Hughes, Tristan Vreeling, and William Kempner all get selected in the top 100 picks, I think, of the MLB draft. Last year, Owen Wild, their best pitcher from last year's team, he got selected in the MLB draft. They also lost big first baseman Brian Calmer, and that has resulted in kind of questionable expectations for this team this year. The WCC preseason poll picked Gonzaga to finish 6th. And I think it's an important reminder that the WCC is a good baseball conference. Like Gonzaga, when Gonzaga has bad down years in basketball, when they're, when they lose a bunch of talent, like say, I don't know, Drew Timme and Julian Strother and Malachi Smith and Rasir Bolton, the expectation is still like, oh, maybe they'll finish second. Maybe they'll finish second instead of first. Baseball is a different breed, different animal. There's a lot of really good teams in the WCC for baseball. Santa Clara has been historically very good. St. Mary's has been up and down, but they've had some great years. San Francisco has had some great years. San Diego had one of the best players in the conference history in Chris Bryant. This was a while ago, but Chris Bryant's still a very, very good Major League Baseball player. This conference, being with many of the teams being located in the California, in Southern California in particular, they get a lot of baseball talent. So for Gonzaga, it's hard to stay at the top in the conference. They were there for the last couple of years. Now they're projected to finish 6th. And it's less about, oh, we're confident Gonzaga is not that good. It's more of like, we don't really know. Team's got some community college guys coming in that there's some expectations for. Their best starter, their Friday night starter, is a junior college transfer from Spokane Falls. Like, this team just isn't, it's kind of hard to know what they have right now. So it's going to be fun to see how they do. Does this team exceed expectations, push towards the top of the WCC? Do they continue to struggle? What does that mean? Do they make some more adjustments? Like, how is the NIL kind of factoring in for college baseball? It's something I'm very curious about. I'm hoping to get an opportunity to speak to Coach Harmon or somebody within that department on that staff and kind of get a sense of what the last couple of years have been like for baseball and kind of where they feel this team is at. So we're hoping to be able to line up a conversation like that here shortly. But going to be some excitement. UCLA is always a good program, so it'll be interesting to see how they do in this first weekend. But certainly going to be trying to track along and give some updates on this baseball program as we get into the meat of their season here starting tonight. But want to close out the show talking about the women's basketball team. They smoked St. Mary's on Thursday. We're not surprised by that because they've just been obliterating everybody that they have played. 28-point victory for the Zags over the Gales. All 5 starters for Gonzaga were in double figures. Brenna Maxwell and Kaylin Trung had 20 points apiece. The team shot 15 of 33 from distance, 45.5% from 3, 15 made threes. Just ridiculous levels of outside shooting efficiency for this team. They're only up 24-21 in the first quarter, but then they just outscored St. Mary's 25-8 in the second quarter, coasted to an easy victory after that. And they did it with not a particularly great game from Yvonne Ejim. Not that we're surprised. They won 2 games in spectacular fashion without Yvonne at all. And it's not like she was terrible in this game. She had 10 points and 10 rebounds. She had a double-double with 3 steals. She just shot 4 of 12 from the field. Not a great efficiency night for Yvonne, but when Brenna Maxwell is going to drop 20, when Kaylin Trung is going to drop 20, when the team's going to shoot 15 or make 15 threes, it just doesn't matter. They can beat you so many different ways. And yet the committee, they're just not seeing it yet. They're not seeing it yet. The top 16 bracket reveal for women's basketball happened, I think it was on Thursday evening. Maybe it was Wednesday evening. Apologies. I don't remember the exact day. Regardless, this is something that is going to happen on the men's side on Saturday, where they're going to reveal here are the top 4 seeds. I mean, like the projected top 4 seeds at this point. Obviously, it can and will change between now and Selection Monday, but that is where they're at right now. Gonzaga wasn't on it. Gonzaga is the first team in college basketball to 25 wins. Gonzaga is 11th in the net. Gonzaga beat Stanford by 18 points, who is very, very much on that list, mind you. Worst defeat Stanford's taken in 4 years. They are blowing out everybody in their conference. Obviously, the reason Gonzaga is not on this list is because the conference is viewed so negatively that people are not taking Gonzaga seriously despite ridiculous levels. They have 2 losses this year. 2 losses. One of them to Washington State, who's very good as well. One of them to Louisville, who's on this list. That's it. That's it. 3 of the 4 3 seeds are lower than Gonzaga in the net ranking. 3 of the 4 seeds are also lower than Gonzaga in the net ranking. And I'm not saying the net ranking is everything. And I'm not saying that the people who make the committee or the committee who makes the top 16 selections who revealed this on Thursday evening, I'm not saying they should just be going down the list of the net rankings and it should be 1, 2, 3. Like, no, that's not how it should be. I don't think anybody realistically believes that. But this Gonzaga team should be on there. Whoever does ESPN bracketology on the women's side, they have Gonzaga as a 5 seed right now. 5 seed in Portland, which being in Portland would be pretty great. But a 5 seed, I think this team needs to be a 4 seed. 11th in the net, 25 wins. Haven't won a conference game by less than 18 points. And I get it. I get the WCC is bad. I'm not arguing that it's not bad. But this team is dominant. The net exists to help parse out differences between teams who play different competition levels. That's what its functionality is for, among other things, but that's a big part of it. If the computer system that you designed to parse out how these teams are doing against different competition levels is telling you that Gonzaga is a borderline top 10 team, why are you not listening to them? Why do you not believe that this team deserves to be? I mean, they don't need to be 10th. They don't need to be a 3 seed. But why are they not a top 16 team? Why is the AP voters not putting them there? I mean, they're not watching this team. They're playing late at night. They're beating teams by 40 points. I get it. I understand that. I'm not saying every AP voter needs to be watching every game and needs to watch every Gonzaga game. I understand that they can't do that, but this team needs more respect. There's just no other way to look at it. They need more respect. I would be miserable if I was the 4 seed that got Gonzaga as a 5 seed. I would be unhappy about that without a doubt. I'd be unhappy if I was the 2 or the 3 seed on that side. Heck, the 1 seed, they're going to have to play Gonzaga in the Sweet 16. If Gonzaga's a 5 seed and they crush that 4 seed, I wouldn't want to be that 1 seed. Excited to see what the rest of the season looks like for Gonzaga women's team. If they continue to do what they're doing, maybe that'll push them into that conversation, win the WCC tournament, finish the season with 30-plus wins. Perhaps they'll get the respect that they deserve, get that 4 seed, get a top 4 seed. But it has been challenging to see this team not get the respect that they deserve throughout the season. And I hope that can shift between now and Selection Monday, but I'd be lying if I said I was very confident that it will. That's going to wrap it up for us today here on the Locked On Zags podcast. Thank you all so much for making this show your first listen or your first watch of the day. We will be back on Monday recapping Gonzaga's hopeful victory over Pacific on Saturday, as well as getting you ready for the week to come. Thanks again for listening, and until next time, as always, go Zags.